The day I discovered my own sister had stolen my entire inheritance was the same day I learned to walk again. Betrayal and triumph, wrapped in the same 24 hours. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Emma Wilson, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought mattered, only to find what truly did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra. Special for you. Seattle's winter rain beat against the hospital window as I stared at the ceiling of room 412, counting the tiles for the 37th time that week. 3 months earlier, I'd been standing on the scaffolding of my biggest architectural project. Yet, the Wilson Community Arts Center, named after my late father, when a sudden structural failure sent me plummeting 3 stories onto the concrete below. The doctors called it a miracle I survived. Multiple fractures in both legs, a shattered pelvis, and a concussion that left me unconscious for 11 days. When I finally opened my eyes, my sister Rebecca was there, clutching my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. "We thought we'd lost you, Em." In those early days, Rebecca was my rock. While our mother Diane was too overwhelmed to visit regularly, hospitals reminded her too much of Dad's final days, Rebecca came every day. She brought fresh flowers, gossip from the office, and updates about the trust fund our father had left. Us. "Don't worry about anything," she'd say, arranging tulips in a vase by my bed. "I've taken care of all the paperwork while you heal." The trustees were so understanding about the situation. I'd never been particularly interested in the financial details of Dad's estate. As the youngest daughter of Richard Wilson, founder of Wilson Construction, I'd inherited his passion for building, not for balance sheets. When he died 2 years ago, I was more concerned with continuing his legacy through my designs than with the $1.6 million trust he'd split evenly between Rebecca and me. My focus had always been on my career at Horizon Designs, where I'd worked my way up from junior architect to project lead. The community center was supposed to be my masterpiece, a combination of functionality and beauty that would honor my father while establishing my own reputation. Now it was on indefinite hold, and so was my life. Physical therapy sessions filled my mornings, agonizing hours of trying to teach my body to follow basic commands again. Afternoons dragged with reality TV and occasional visits from colleagues, who grew less frequent as weeks turned into months. Evenings belonged to Rebecca, who would arrive after work with takeout and reassurances. "The firm is holding your position," she promised, "and the trust fund is safe, more than enough to cover these medical bills." I believed her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my big sister, my only sibling, the person who'd taught me to ride a bike and apply eyeliner, the person who'd held me at Dad's funeral when my knees gave out. The idea that she could betray me didn't even enter my realm of possibility. The first hint that something was wrong came from an unexpected source. Olivia Martinez, my college roommate turned nurse, wasn't assigned to my floor, but she made a point to check on me during her breaks. One Tuesday afternoon, she slipped into my room with an odd expression. "Hey, warrior woman," she said, our usual greeting. But instead of launching into hospital gossip, she hesitated. "Emma, I overheard something at the billing department today. Your insurance claim was denied again, but someone mentioned your accounts are showing insufficient funds for the out-of-pocket expenses." I laughed. "That's impossible. There must be some mix-up." "Probably," she agreed, "but maybe you should call your bank, just to be sure." I promised I would, then promptly forgot as my afternoon dissolved into a particularly brutal physical therapy session. By the time Rebecca arrived that evening, I was too exhausted to remember Olivia's concern. A week later, Dr. Jenkins delivered the news that I could be discharged within the month if my progress continued. "You'll need extensive outpatient therapy, of course," he cautioned, "and your home will require modifications for wheelchair accessibility initially." Rebecca frowned slightly. "The Queen Anne house has so many stairs," she said, Maybe you should stay with Daniel and me until you're more mobile. Something in her tone struck me as odd. The family home, our childhood home, had been left to both of us in Dad's will, with the understanding that I would live there since Rebecca had already purchased a lakeside condo with her husband Daniel. Now she spoke as if the house belonged solely to her. That night, after Rebecca left, I finally called Pacific Northwest Trust and Savings from my hospital room. After several transfers and identity verifications, I reached someone who could access my account information. "I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson, but your trust account shows a balance of $4,327 to 16. The room seemed to tilt. That can't be right. There should be over $800,000. "Let me check the transaction history," the representative said. The silence stretched for an excruciating minute. "It appears there was a major withdrawal 3 months ago, just after your hospitalization began. The funds were transferred to another account with authorization from Rebecca Wilson, who is listed as having power of attorney." My throat constricted. "That's my sister. There must be some mistake." "The documentation appears to be in order," he replied carefully, "though I noticed the power of attorney was activated the same day as the transfer, March 15th. March 15th. The day of my accident, the day I was unconscious, being rushed into emergency surgery. "I never signed a power of attorney," I whispered. "I see." His tone changed subtly. "Ms. Wilson, I think this is a matter that requires further investigation. Our fraud department—" "No," I interrupted, my mind racing. "Not yet. I need to speak with my sister first." After hanging up, I lay in the darkness, replaying every conversation with Rebecca over the past 3 months. Her insistence that I not worry about finances. Her subtle suggestions that I might want to sell my stake in the family home. The way she'd volunteered to handle all the paperwork while I recovered. Sleep eluded me that night, and the next morning, I called Patricia Henderson, our family lawyer. Her assistant initially tried to schedule me for the following week, but something in my voice must have conveyed my urgency. "Emma," Patricia greeted me warmly when she called back that afternoon. "I'm so glad to hear you're recovering. What can I help you with?" "I need to know the details of my father's will and trust," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And any documents that might have been processed since my accident." Her pause spoke volumes. "Emma," I thought, "Rebecca said you two had discussed everything and were in agreement." "In agreement about what?" Another pause. "About the reallocation of the trust funds and the transfer of your ownership stake in the family home to her name." The room began to spin. "I never agreed to any of that." "Oh dear," Patricia said quietly. "Emma, Rebecca brought in power of attorney documentation. She said that given your condition, you wanted to simplify your financial affairs and focus on recovery." "She lied," I said, my voice breaking. "Patricia, she forged my signature and stole my inheritance while I was unconscious in the hospital." The silence that followed confirmed my worst fears. When Patricia finally spoke, her voice had shifted from warm to professional. "I need to review these documents immediately. If what you're suggesting is true, this is a serious matter of fraud." "Please don't contact Rebecca yet," I pleaded. "I need time to confront her myself." Patricia reluctantly agreed, but insisted on sending over all the relevant documents to my email immediately. For the next hour, I scrolled through PDFs on my phone, seeing my forged signature on paper after paper. A power of attorney dated March 15th. Transfer authorizations for my entire trust fund except for a small remainder. Quit claim deeds for my half of the family home. By the final document, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I must have dozed off eventually because the sound of the door opening startled me awake. Rebecca stood there, stylishly dressed in a cream blazer and holding a paper bag from my favorite bakery. "Brought you those almond croissants you love," she said cheerfully. Then she saw my face. "What's wrong? Did the doctor say something?" I studied her. This person I'd trusted implicitly my entire life. My sister. My protector. A stranger. "Where's my money, Rebecca?" She froze, the bakery bag suspended midair. "What?" "My trust fund. The $800,000 Dad left me. The money you transferred out of my account using a forged power of attorney." The bag lowered slowly to the side table. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca's expression shifted from shock to something harder. "You weren't supposed to find out yet." Not a denial, not even an attempt at one. Just the cold acknowledgement that she'd planned for me to discover the theft. Just not while I was still vulnerable. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How could you do this to me?" Rebecca sank into the visitor's chair, her posture deflating. "You don't understand the pressure we've been under. Daniel's investment firm collapsed last year. We lost everything. Our savings, our retirement accounts, even our condo is underwater on the mortgage. So you stole from me? While I was fighting for my life? I was desperate," her voice rose. "And it's not like you needed it right away. You were unconscious, Emma. The doctors weren't even sure you'd walk again. Meanwhile, we were facing bankruptcy, possible criminal charges for Daniel if the firm's issues went public. That doesn't give you the right to steal my inheritance." "I was going to pay you back," she insisted, but her eyes slid away from mine. "Once Daniel's new venture takes off, we would have replaced everything." "With what? Monopoly money?" I gestured toward the window. "I'm about to be discharged with hundreds of thousands in medical bills, months of physical therapy ahead, and modifications needed for the house, which you apparently now own entirely." Rebecca's face hardened. "It's not my fault you decided to personally inspect that scaffolding. You always had to prove yourself, be the perfect daughter following in Dad's footsteps." The cruelty of her words stole my breath, as if I'd chosen to fall, as if I deserved what happened to me. "Get out," I whispered. "Emma, be reasonable." "Get out!" I screamed, louder than I'd intended. A nurse appeared in the doorway, concerned. "Ms. Wilson, you need to stay calm. Your blood pressure—" "She needs to leave," I said, pointing at Rebecca. "Now." My sister gathered her designer purse, her face a mask of indignation rather than remorse. "You're making a mistake, Emma. We're family. We can work this out." "We were family," I corrected her. "Now you're just someone I used to know." After she left, I fell apart. Deep, racking sobs that tore through my healing body. The nurse tried to comfort me, but how could I explain that I'd lost more than money? I'd lost my last remaining family connection, the person I'd trusted most in the world. When my phone rang an hour later, I almost didn't answer it. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with the Pacific Northwest Trust and Savings prefix. Expecting it to be the fraud department following up, I answered with a hoarse, "Hello, Ms. Wilson, this is Michael Thompson, Vice President of Trust Services at Pacific Northwest. I've been reviewing your account situation, and I wonder if you might be available for a meeting tomorrow morning. There's something important we need to discuss in person." "I'm still in the hospital," I explained. "Yes, I'm aware. With your permission, I'd like to come to you. What I have to share may significantly impact your current circumstances." His formal tone gave nothing away, but a flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Of course. Anytime tomorrow morning would be fine. After hanging up, I stared out at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle illuminated against the night sky. For the first time in months, I felt something other than pain or betrayal. I felt curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, the faintest hint of something I'd thought was lost forever. Possibility. Sleep eluded me that night as I wrestled with waves of betrayal washing over me. Every memory with Rebecca took on a sinister new light. Had she always resented me? Was our entire relationship built on a foundation of jealousy I'd been too blind to see? The questions tormented me until dawn painted the Seattle skyline in hues of pink and gold. By the time Michael Thompson arrived at 9 o'clock, I had pulled myself together as best I could. The hospital staff had helped me into a proper sweater instead of the standard issue gown, and I'd managed to brush my hair into some semblance of normalcy. Small victories that seemed monumental after months of dependency. The banker was not what I expected. Instead of the stern, pinstriped figure I'd imagined, Michael Thompson was a man in his early 50s with kind eyes, a slightly rumpled navy suit, and the relaxed demeanor of someone comfortable in his own skin. He knocked gently on my open door, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. "Ms. Wilson? I'm Michael Thompson from Pacific Northwest Trust." "Please, call me Emma," I said, gesturing to the visitor's chair by my bed. "And thank you for coming here." He settled into the chair, placing his portfolio on his lap. "First, let me say how sorry I am about your situation, both your accident and the irregularities with your account." "You mean my sister stealing my entire inheritance while I was in a coma?" His lips quirked in a sympathetic smile. "Yes, that particular irregularity." He opened his portfolio and removed several documents. "I've been with Pacific Northwest for 27 years, Emma. I knew your father quite well." This surprised me. "You did?" Richard Wilson was more than just a client. We served together on the Seattle Children's Hospital Board for almost a decade. He paused, studying me. "You have his eyes, you know. And from what I've heard, his integrity as well." A lump formed in my throat. Even now, 2 years after his death, missing my father could hit me like a physical blow. "I'm trying to live up to his example," I managed, "which is precisely why I'm here." Michael leaned forward slightly. "Your father was an exceptionally cautious man, especially when it came to protecting his legacy. The trust fund you and your sister received was only part of his estate planning." My heart began to beat faster. "What do you mean?" "Richard established a secondary trust, one that even our regular trust department wasn't aware of. It was held in our private client division under special instructions." He handed me a document with official bank letterhead. This trust was to remain sealed until one of two conditions was met. Either 10 years had passed since his death, or— He paused meaningfully. One of his daughters attempted to defraud the other. My hands trembled as I took the document. He anticipated this? That Rebecca might— "Your father didn't specify which daughter might betray the other," Michael clarified. He simply acknowledged the possibility that family dynamics could change after his death. Richard understood human nature, and he'd seen too many families destroyed by inheritance disputes. I scanned the document, legal terms swimming before my eyes until I reached the final page where a number stood out in stark relief. My breath caught. Is this amount correct?" I whispered, pointing to the figure. Michael nodded. "Your father was a more successful businessman than many people realized. While the initial trusts for you and your sister represented a portion of his wealth, this contingency trust contains the bulk of his estate. $4, $7 million to be exact." The room seemed to spin around me and not from my medication. "And this money is—" "Yours," Michael confirmed. "According to the terms your father established, in the event of attempted fraud between siblings, the entirety of this trust transfers to the wronged party." "Rebecca gets nothing?" "Not from this fund, no, and there's more." He produced another document. Your father included a specific provision about the family home. If either daughter attempted to deprive the other of her rightful share, full ownership would revert to the wronged party. I sank back against my pillows, overwhelmed. Dad had known. Somehow, he'd sensed that Rebecca's resentment might one day turn destructive. Even from beyond the grave, he'd found a way to protect me. "There's something else you should know," Michael continued, his tone gentler now. "The initial transfer that Rebecca initiated from your account triggered an automatic alert in our system, a safeguard your father requested. I should have contacted you immediately, but I was unconscious," I finished for him. "Yes. By the time you regained consciousness, the paperwork appeared legitimate. The power of attorney seemed properly executed." He looked genuinely remorseful. "I deeply regret not questioning it more thoroughly." "It's not your fault," I said, still trying to process everything. "Rebecca went to extraordinary lengths to pull this off. Nevertheless, the bank bears some responsibility, which is why I've been authorized to offer you compensation for any inconvenience and to cover all legal fees involved in rectifying the situation." He produced yet another document. "We're also prepared to assist in recovering the funds Rebecca misappropriated, though given the information we've gathered about her husband's financial situation, full recovery may be challenging." My mind raced, trying to grasp the full implications of what was happening. Yesterday, I'd been a victim, penniless, betrayed, and facing a mountain of medical debt. Today, I was a millionaire several times over, with my future suddenly wide open again. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. Michael smiled. "Your father once told me that the true measure of wealth isn't how much money you have, but what you choose to do with it. I think he'd be very interested to see what you build with this opportunity." Build. The word resonated through me, connecting to the architect I'd always been, the builder's daughter who saw potential in empty spaces. For the first time since my accident, I felt the stirrings of that creative energy again. "When can I access these funds?" I asked, my mind already calculating the possibilities. "The account is active as of this morning," Michael replied, "though I would recommend consulting with a financial advisor before making any major decisions." "And the house?" "As of today, the property at 247 Highland Drive is solely in your name. I took the liberty of filing the necessary paperwork this morning based on the contingency provisions." I nodded, my thoughts turning to Rebecca. Despite everything she'd done, a part of me ached at the finality of this rupture between us. "Will you be contacting my sister about this?" Michael's expression turned solemn. "A notification regarding the secondary trust has been sent to her, yes. As for the legal consequences of her actions," he hesitated, "that would be your decision. The bank has an obligation to report financial fraud, but given the family circumstances, we could delay that report if you wish to handle this privately." The thought of Rebecca facing criminal charges sent a conflicted pang through my chest. "I need time to think about that." "Of course." He closed his portfolio and stood. "Take whatever time you need. Here's my direct number. Call me day or night if you have any questions or concerns." He placed a business card on my bedside table. "And Emma? For what it's worth, your father would be proud of how you're handling this." After Michael left, I sat in stunned silence, staring at the Seattle skyline through my window. The Space Needle stood tall against the clearing sky, a reminder of how architecture could become a symbol of possibility. Dad had built his construction company from nothing, driven by the belief that the structures we create reflect our highest values. He'd taught me that buildings weren't just steel and concrete. They were physical manifestations of hope, of community, of future thinking. What would I build with this unexpected second chance? My physical therapy session that afternoon took on new meaning. Each painful step wasn't just about healing my body anymore. It was about reclaiming my independence, my ability to move forward both literally and figuratively. My therapist, Jim, noticed the change immediately. "Something's different today," he observed as I pushed myself harder than I had in previous sessions. "You've got fire in your eyes." I managed a small smile through the exertion. Let's just say I've found a new motivation. By that evening, I was exhausted, but filled with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since before the accident. I was scribbling renovation ideas for the Queen Anne house in a notebook when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Emma, please call me. We need to talk." "Rebecca." I set the phone down without responding. Another text quickly followed. "I just got a letter from the bank. Is this your doing? Please, Em. I'm begging you." The desperation in her words brought me no satisfaction. I had imagined this moment differently, expected to feel vindicated, triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Rebecca's betrayal hadn't just cost her my trust. It had cost me a sister. The phone rang. Rebecca's number. After 4 rings, it stopped, only to start again immediately. On the 3rd attempt, I finally answered. "What do you want, Rebecca?" "Emma." Her voice was thick with tears. "The bank. They're saying Dad had another trust? That I'm being cut out completely? They're threatening fraud charges, Em. Daniel is talking about fleeing the country. Please, you have to help me." "Help you?" The words felt bitter on my tongue. "The way you helped me when you stole every penny I had while I was fighting to survive?" "I know I messed up. I know that now." Her voice cracked. "But we're sisters. We're family. Dad wouldn't want—" "Don't." My voice was ice. "Don't you dare tell me what Dad would want. He built in these protections specifically because he knew what you might do. That's not fair. I was desperate. And I was unconscious. I trusted you with everything, and you saw it as an opportunity." My hands shook with anger and hurt. "You left me with nothing, Rebecca. No money, no home, not even the dignity of making my own choices." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. Please, Emma, if they press charges, I could go to prison. Think of what that would do to Mom." The mention of our mother, who had barely visited me in the hospital, sparked fresh anger. "Is Mom part of this too? Did she know what you did?" "No, God, no, she has no idea. She barely understands Dad's will as it is. This would destroy her." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of this impossible situation. Rebecca had committed a crime against me, a deliberate, calculated betrayal. But pursuing criminal charges would shatter our already fragile family beyond repair. "I need time to think," I finally said. "I'm being discharged next week. Don't contact me again until then." "Emma, please!" I hung up, turned off my phone, and stared out at the darkening Seattle sky. The city lights winked on one by one, creating a constellation of human persistence against the night. I wondered if any of those lights belonged to homes where families actually protected each other instead of preying on one another's vulnerabilities. The next morning, Olivia stopped by before her shift, coffee in hand and concern in her eyes. "You look like you haven't slept," she observed, handing me the steaming cup. "Bad night?" I gave her an abbreviated version of recent events. Her eyes widened as I described Rebecca's betrayal and the unexpected reversal of fortune. "Holy shit. She breathed when I finished. "That's like something from a movie. What are you going to do about your sister?" "I don't know." I sipped the coffee, grateful for its warmth. Part of me wants to let her face the consequences. Let the bank press charges, see her deal with what she's created. But another part still loves her, Olivia finished softly, because she's your sister despite everything. I nodded, feeling a treacherous tear slip down my cheek. Is that pathetic? After what she did? It's human. Olivia squeezed my hand. And it's very you, Emma. You've always seen the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. Dad used to say that too, I said, remembering his gentle teasing about my rose-colored glasses. So what now, besides being secretly loaded? Her attempt at lightness made me smile despite myself. First, I need to get out of this hospital. Dr. Jenkins says I can be discharged next Tuesday if my final assessments go well. I hesitated, then added, I was thinking of asking if you'd help me settle back into the house, just until I can arrange for proper home care. Olivia's face lit up. Are you kidding? I've been hoping you'd ask. My lease is up next month anyway, and that Queen Anne house of yours has that amazing garden apartment I've always loved. It needs renovation, I warned. The whole house does. Then it's perfect for an architect who needs a project to keep her mind occupied during recovery. She grinned. We'll make it spectacular. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. We will, won't we? The next few days passed in a blur of discharge preparations, final physical therapy assessments, and meetings with Michael Thompson to arrange for immediate access to funds for medical expenses and home modifications. I didn't return Rebecca's increasingly desperate messages, focusing instead on the future I was determined to rebuild. By Monday afternoon, Dr. Jenkins had signed my discharge papers. You've made remarkable progress, he said, reviewing my chart. But remember, you're still looking at months of outpatient therapy. No pushing yourself too hard. I'll make sure she behaves, Olivia promised, already bustling around the room, packing up the few personal items I'd accumulated during my stay. As she helped me into the wheelchair that hospital policy required for discharge, my phone buzzed with another text from Rebecca. Mom's asking where you'll be staying after discharge. Are you coming to the house? Please answer me, Emma. I showed the message to Olivia, who raised an eyebrow. She still thinks you don't know the house is legally yours again? Apparently. Oh, this I've got to see. She finished tying my overnight bag to the back of the wheelchair. Ready to go home, homeowner? The journey from Northwest Memorial to Queen Anne took us through downtown Seattle, the familiar cityscape simultaneously comforting and strange after months of seeing it only through a hospital window. When Olivia's car finally turned onto Highland Drive, my chest tightened with a complex mix of emotions. The house stood as it always had, a graceful craftsman with a deep front porch and dormered windows, surrounded by the garden my mother had once lovingly tended before arthritis forced her to simpler accommodations. Dad had built the place himself, in the early years of his business, pouring all his skills and hopes into creating a home that would shelter his family for generations. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed Rebecca's silver Audi parked along the curb. Want me to run interference? Olivia asked, nodding toward the car. No, I said, straightening in my seat. I need to do this myself. Getting from the car to the front door was a painstaking process with my walker, but I refused Olivia's offer to bring the wheelchair from the trunk. I would enter my home on my own 2 feet, however unsteady they might be. Rebecca opened the door before we reached it, her face a mask of anxious anticipation. She looked different somehow, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Her hair hung limp, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her clothes seemed thrown on rather than carefully coordinated. Emma? She breathed, relief flooding her features. You came home. Yes, I replied evenly. I came home. Her eyes darted nervously to Olivia, clearly uncertain how much my friend knew. I've prepared the downstairs guest room for you. It seemed easier than dealing with the stairs to your old bedroom. I nodded, moving past her into the foyer with slow, deliberate steps. The familiar smell of lemon polish and old wood wrapped around me like a forgotten embrace. Despite everything, this place still felt like home. Rebecca, I said, turning carefully to face her. We need to talk. She nodded, wringing her hands. Of course, whatever you want. Liv, Could you take my bag to the guest room? I think Rebecca and I should speak privately in Dad's study. Olivia gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze before taking the overnight bag down the hallway. Rebecca led the way to the study, walking slowly to accommodate my labored pace. The room was exactly as Dad had left it. Shelves of architectural books, drafting table in the corner, his collection of antique tools displayed on the wall. I eased myself into his leather chair, feeling a connection to him that transcended death. Rebecca perched anxiously on the edge of the visitor's chair, looking like a defendant awaiting sentencing. In many ways, she was. I know about everything, I began without preamble. The forged power of attorney, the emptied trust fund, the attempt to steal my half of the house. She flinched, but didn't deny it. Emma, I also know about Dad's secondary trust, I continued, and that the house is now legally mine. Entirely mine. Her face crumpled. Are you going to press charges? The bank says. The bank will follow my lead on this, I interrupted. Whether you face criminal fraud charges is my decision. Tears spilled onto her cheeks. What are you going to do? I studied my sister, this person I'd loved and trusted my entire life, this stranger who had betrayed me so completely. The anger was still there, a burning coal in my chest, but alongside it was something else. Memory, history, the echo of shared childhood laughter in these very rooms. Where's Daniel? I asked instead of answering. Her expression darkened. Gone. He left 3 days ago, after the bank's letter arrived. Took what was left of the money and disappeared. She laughed bitterly. Apparently, the idea of potential fraud charges wasn't compatible with his 5-year plan. Despite everything, I felt a stab of sympathy. Rebecca had destroyed our relationship for a man who abandoned her at the first sign of trouble. I'm sorry, I said, surprising myself with my sincerity. You're sorry? She looked confused. I stole your inheritance, and you're sorry? I'm sorry that you valued money over our relationship. I'm sorry that you hitched your life to someone who didn't deserve your loyalty. I leaned forward slightly. And I'm sorry that you're about to lose this house, too. Her eyes widened in panic. Emma, please. I have nowhere else to go. Daniel cleaned out our accounts before he left. You should have thought of that before. You decided to steal from me. I know, she whispered, dropping her gaze to her hands. I've ruined everything. I was so desperate. Daniel kept saying we'd lose everything, that we'd end up on the street. He said it would just be temporary, that we'd pay it all back once his new venture took off. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. I believed him because I needed to. Because the alternative was admitting I'd married a failure who was dragging me down with him. I sat silently, letting her words hang in the air between us. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking the seconds of this fractured moment. I don't expect you to forgive me, Rebecca finally said. I wouldn't, in your position. But please, Emma, I'm begging you, don't make me homeless, on top of everything else. The request crystallized something in me. Not forgiveness, I wasn't ready for that, but clarity. I'm not going to press charges, I said after a long moment. Not because you deserve that mercy, but because dragging this into the criminal justice system would only cause more pain for everyone involved, including Mom. Relief flooded her face. Thank you, Emma. Thank you so... I'm not finished, I interrupted. You can stay in the house for now, in the garden apartment, not the main house. You'll pay rent, which we'll establish based on fair market value. If you're serious about rebuilding your life, this gives you a foundation to start from. But make no mistake, Rebecca, this isn't forgiveness, it's pragmatism. She nodded rapidly, tears flowing freely now. I understand. I'll do whatever you ask. And if you ever try to take advantage of me or anyone else in our family again, I won't hesitate to pursue every legal option available to me. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear," she whispered. I gripped the arms of Dad's chair, suddenly exhausted by the emotional toll of the conversation. "I need to rest now. We can discuss the details tomorrow." Rebecca stood, hesitating at the edge of the desk. "For what it's worth, Emma, I am truly sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I betrayed the one person who's always been there for me. I don't expect you to believe that now, but I hope someday you might." I didn't respond, and after a moment, she quietly left the study. Through the window, I watched her cross the yard to the separate entrance of the garden apartment, her shoulders hunched in defeat. Olivia appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" "Not really," I admitted, "but I will be." She crossed the room and perched on the edge of the desk. "Want to tell me your master plan? Because I know that look. Emma Wilson. You're plotting something." A small smile curved my lips. "Not plotting, designing. The house renovations? That's just the beginning." I gestured toward the drafting table. "Dad built this house as a foundation for our family. I want to build something too, something that matters." "The community center?" Olivia guessed. I shook my head. "Something new, something that combines Dad's practical approach with my design sensibilities." The idea had been forming since my conversation with Michael Thompson, crystallizing further during my confrontation with Rebecca. I want to create affordable, accessible housing for people recovering from traumatic injuries or illnesses. Places that are beautiful and functional, that help people rebuild their lives with dignity. Olivia's eyes lit up. "The Wilson Recovery Residences?" "Something like that," I said, the name settling comfortably in my mind. "Using Dad's secondary trust as seed funding." "He would have loved that," Olivia said softly. "I think so too." I gazed around the study, feeling my father's presence in every carefully crafted detail. He always said the true purpose of building wasn't just to create structures, but to create possibilities. Outside, Seattle's persistent rain had given way to a rare sun break, sending shafts of golden light through the study windows. The garden beyond glowed with renewed vibrance, as if awakening from a long dormancy. Like me. The following weeks unfolded in a delicate dance of recovery and reinvention. Each morning began with physical therapy exercises that left me breathless and determined. Afternoons were devoted to sketching preliminary designs for what I now firmly called the Wilson Recovery Residences. Evenings brought the strange new reality of sharing a roof with Rebecca, while maintaining the careful distance our fractured relationship required. We established an uneasy truce, passing like ships in the night, her leaving for job interviews. As I emerged for breakfast, me retiring to my rooms when she returned in the evenings. She had found temporary work as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm, a significant step down from her previous executive position, but enough to cover the modest rent I charged for the garden apartment. Olivia had moved into the blue bedroom upstairs, transforming it with her vibrant energy and collection of houseplants. Her presence buffered the tension, providing both practical support and emotional ballast as I navigated my new circumstances. 1 month after my hospital discharge, I sat at Dad's drafting table, fine-tuning sketches for the first Wilson Recovery Residence prototype. My fingers still lacked their former precision, but the creative drive had returned full force. I was so absorbed in my work that I didn't hear Olivia enter until she placed a mug of tea at my elbow. "Earth to Emma," she said, peering over my shoulder at the drawings. "These are incredible." I stretched, wincing at the stiffness in my back. "They're getting there. I want to incorporate everything I wished for during recovery. Wider doorways, accessible storage, beautiful spaces that don't scream medical facility." "When are you meeting with the architect who's helping with the technical specs?" Tomorrow afternoon. Marcus Jeffries from Horizon Designs. You remember him? He's bringing the structural engineer too. I took a sip of tea, grateful for its warmth. I want to break ground on the first residence within 6 months. Ambitious, Olivia commented, settling into Dad's old reading chair. How's the site search going? I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. Michael Thompson came through again. Turns out Dad owned several undeveloped parcels around the city, property he acquired over the years but never built on. One in particular, overlooking Green Lake, is perfect for the first residence. Your dad really did think of everything, didn't he? He was always 10 steps ahead. I glanced at the photograph on the wall. Dad standing proudly in front of his first major project, arms slung around my teenage shoulders as I beamed in my first hard hat. I just wish he'd been more transparent with Rebecca about the secondary. Trust. Maybe if she'd known. Olivia's expression turned skeptical. You think that would have stopped her? Emma, she forged documents while you were in a coma. Knowing about another trust might have just made her more determined to get everything. Maybe, I conceded, unwilling to fully explore the darker implications about my sister's character. Speaking of Rebecca, have you seen her today? Briefly this morning. She mentioned something about a second interview with that PR firm downtown. Olivia hesitated, then added, She asked if you'd be willing to give her a reference. I blinked in surprise. A reference? After everything? I think she's desperate. The administrative job barely covers your rent, let alone her other expenses. And with Daniel gone. I set down my pencil, conflicted. Despite everything, the thought of Rebecca struggling stirred uncomfortable feelings. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet, but perhaps a reluctant compassion. We shared the same blood, the same childhood memories, the same loss of our father. I'll think about it, I said finally. Depends on the position. Olivia nodded, knowing better than to push. On a completely different note, Dr. Jenkins called while you were sketching. He wants to move your next assessment up to Thursday. Is something wrong? The opposite, actually. He said your last progress report was so positive that he wants to adjust your therapy schedule. She grinned. In normal person language, I think that means you're healing faster than expected. A warm sense of accomplishment spread through me. After months of feeling betrayed by my own body, each milestone felt like reclaiming territory in a long, exhausting war. That reminds me, Olivia continued, checking her watch. The contractor is supposed to be here in 20 minutes to go, over the bathroom renovation plans. I nodded, gathering my sketches into a portfolio. Converting the downstairs bathroom into a fully accessible space had become my first priority, a practical necessity that also served as a test run for the design principles I hoped to incorporate into the recovery residences. The doorbell rang, just as I finished organizing my notes. Olivia went to answer it while I maneuvered carefully from the drafting table to my wheelchair. Though I could walk short distances with a cane now, longer periods still required wheels. A reality I was, learning to accept rather than resent. Emma? Olivia called from the foyer. It's not the contractor, it's your mother. My stomach dropped. Mom had visited exactly once since my discharge. A stiff, uncomfortable hour during which she'd avoided any mention of Rebecca's betrayal or my subsequent inheritance of the secondary trust. She'd left with promises to return soon, but 3 weeks had passed without a word. I wheeled myself to the foyer, where Diane Wilson stood clutching her handbag like a shield. At 64, she remained elegant in her tailored pantsuit, silver-streaked hair perfectly styled in its chin-length bob. But new lines had formed around her eyes, and she seemed diminished somehow, shrinking into herself. Mom, I greeted. Her aiming for neutral but landing somewhere closer to cautious. This is a surprise. I should have called, she said, glancing nervously at Olivia. I just thought, We should talk. Olivia took the cue. I'll make some fresh tea and give you two some privacy. I led Mom into the living room, positioning my wheelchair by the sofa where she perched stiffly. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us until I finally broke it. How have you been? She smoothed invisible wrinkles from her slacks. Managing. The arthritis has been worse with all this rain. She glanced around the room, noting the subtle changes I'd already implemented. Furniture, rearranged for better accessibility, the new smart home controls installed beside doorways. You've been making changes. Necessary ones, I replied. The house wasn't exactly wheelchair-friendly before. Mom nodded, then drew a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I've spoken with Rebecca. Of course. Rebecca had always been Mom's confidant, the two sharing a bond that sometimes left me feeling like an outsider in my own family. I assumed you had. She told me everything, Emma, about what she did to you, about Daniel leaving, about your arrangement with the garden apartment. Her voice caught slightly. What I don't understand is why you didn't tell me yourself. The question stung more than I expected. You barely visited me in the hospital, Mom. When you did, you spent more time talking about Rebecca's career troubles than asking about my recovery. Why would I think you'd take my side in this? Her face crumpled. Is that what you think? That I would condone what she did? Wouldn't you? You've always favored her. Dad was the only one who… I stopped, the old hurt threatening to choke me. Who understood you? She finished quietly. Who shared your passion for building. I said nothing, the truth of it hanging between us. Mom set her handbag aside and leaned forward. Emma, I need to tell you something about your father. Something I should have told both you and Rebecca years ago. My grip tightened on the wheelchair's armrest. What about Dad? Richard wasn't perfect. She twisted her wedding ring, a habit I'd noticed whenever she was deeply uncomfortable. Our marriage went through a very difficult period about 15 years ago. There was someone else for a while. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Dad had an affair? She nodded, eyes downcast. A woman from the architectural firm that collaborated on the Westlake Tower project. It lasted nearly a year before he ended it and recommitted to our marriage. My mind raced, calculating back 15 years. I would have been in high school, Rebecca in college. I had no idea. We decided not to tell you girls. Richard was deeply ashamed and we were trying to rebuild our relationship. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. But Rebecca found out. She overheard us arguing one night when she was home from college. She confronted your father, threatened to tell you, unless… Unless what? I prompted when she hesitated. Unless he made certain financial arrangements for her future. She said his affair had destroyed her trust in him, in the family stability, and she needed security. Cold understanding washed over me. She blackmailed Dad. Mom flinched at the word but didn't contradict me. Richard set up her first trust fund the following month, separate from any inheritance he planned to leave both of you later. The pieces clicked into terrible alignment. Dad's strained relationship with Rebecca in his final years, her bitter comments about his moral high ground, the separate financial arrangements that had always seemed oddly complex for a family of our size. Does this have something to do with the secondary trust? I asked. The one that activated when Rebecca stole from me? Mom looked surprised. You know about that? Duh. The bank vice president told me everything. Well, almost everything. He said Dad established it as protection in case either daughter tried to defraud the other. I studied her face. But there was more to it, wasn't there? She nodded slowly. Richard knew Rebecca's character had been compromised by what happened. He saw how comfortable she'd become with manipulation when it served her interests. A tear slipped down her cheek. He loved her. We both did. But he wasn't blind to who she'd become. That's why he created that secondary trust with those specific conditions. And you? Did you know what she was planning to do to me while I was in the hospital? No! The denial burst from her with such force I almost believed it. Emma, I would never have allowed that. Yes, I've been closer to Rebecca in many ways, but that doesn't mean I would condone her stealing from you. Then where were you? The question emerged more vulnerable than I'd intended. When I was fighting to walk again, when I discovered what she'd done, where were you, Mom? She seemed to shrink further. I was afraid, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of being caught between my daughters. Afraid of facing what Rebecca had become. And selfishly, afraid of hospitals after watching your father die in one. She wiped away tears with trembling fingers. It was cowardice, Emma. I'm so sorry. The apology landed like a stone in still water, ripples of emotion spreading through me. Anger at her absence, relief at her acknowledgement, sorrow for the broken family we'd become. I don't know what happens next, I said honestly. I'm still processing everything with Rebecca. Adding this new layer about Dad's past and her blackmail, it's a lot to take in. Mom nodded. I understand. I just thought you deserved to know the whole truth about all of us. She reached out tentatively. I'd like to do better, Emma. Be more present. Support your recovery and whatever you decide to do with your inheritance. I allowed her to take my hand, her fingers cool against mine. I'm starting a new project, I said, the words a small olive branch. Using Dad's money to build specialized housing for people recovering from traumatic injuries. Her eyes brightened. He would have loved that. That's what Olivia said. Smart girl, your friend. Mom squeezed my hand before releasing it. May I see your plans sometime? They're preliminary, but yes, I'd like that. The contractor arrived shortly after, ending our conversation, but not before Mom had made arrangements to return the following weekend. As I guided him through my vision for the accessible bathroom renovation, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed. There were too many fresh wounds for that, but perhaps beginning to mend. That evening, as I worked at the drafting table with soft music playing in the background, a knock at the study door interrupted my concentration. Rebecca stood in the doorway, still in her interview clothes, a conservative navy suit that hung slightly loose on her frame. She'd lost weight in recent weeks, her cheekbones more pronounced, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Can I come in? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. I gestured to the visitor's chair. How was the interview? Promising. She sat, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. They want a second meeting next week. She hesitated. Olivia. Mentioned you might consider giving me a reference. I set down my pencil. What's the position? Public Relations Coordinator for a nonprofit. It's focused on financial literacy for women leaving abusive relationships. A touch of irony colored her voice. Apparently, my experience with Daniel's financial misconduct gives me valuable perspective. Despite everything, I nearly smiled. They're not wrong. Rebecca glanced at my sketches. Are those for the recovery housing project? Mom mentioned it when she called. I nodded, surprised at her interest and that Mom had already shared the information. The first residence will be at Dad's Green Lake property. It's a good location, close to medical facilities but residential enough to feel like a real neighborhood. She studied me for a moment. You're really doing this, aren't you? Building? Something completely new. It's what Wilson women do when life falls apart, I replied. We build something better from the ruins. A shadow crossed her face. Some of us destroy instead. I didn't contradict her. We both knew the truth of what she'd done. Mom told me about Dad's affair, I said instead, and about your blackmail. Rebecca flinched as if I'd struck her. She had no right. I disagree. I needed to understand why Dad created that secondary trust the way he did. I studied my sister, this person who shared my blood, but whose choices remained incomprehensible to me. Why, Rebecca? Was it just about the money? Or did you hate me that much? I never hated you, she whispered, eyes fixed on her hands. I envied you. Dad's golden child, the one who inherited his talent and drive, the one who didn't need to manipulate or scheme to earn his respect. She looked up, her gaze haunted. Do you know what it was like growing up as the ordinary daughter? The one who couldn't read blueprints or get excited about structural engineering? You had Mom, I pointed out. You two were always thick, as thieves. Because I needed someone in my corner. Mom understood what it felt like to be overlooked in this family. She shook her head. I'm not justifying what I did to you, Emma. There's no justification. But when Daniel's firm collapsed and he started talking about the money we needed, your trust fund represented everything I'd always resented. Your special connection with Dad, his faith in you, his forgiveness. His forgiveness? For your mistakes, she clarified. You dropped out of college for a year to find yourself, and he just welcomed you back with open arms. I got pregnant at 19, and he threatened to cut me off completely unless I fixed the problem. I stared at her, stunned. You were pregnant? I never knew. No one did except Mom and Dad. And Daniel, of course. It was his. Her laugh held no humor. That's why we got married so young. Dad's ultimatum, abortion or marriage, but no unwed mother in the Wilson family. That doesn't sound like Dad at all, I protested. Not your dad, she agreed bitterly. You got Richard Wilson, the supportive father, the mentor, the champion. I got Richard Wilson, the moralist, the controller, the disappointment. The disparity in our experiences left me reeling. Had we grown up with the same father, or had he been two entirely different men depending on which daughter he was facing? The baby? I asked softly. Miscarriage at 14 weeks, but by then, Daniel and I were already married, already trapped in roles we weren't ready for. She wiped a tear away impatiently. I'm not telling you this for sympathy, Emma. Just context. I made my choices. Terrible, unforgivable choices. But they didn't happen in a vacuum. I wheeled myself to the window, needing distance to process this new information. Outside, twilight had settled over Seattle, the familiar landscape transformed by encroaching darkness, just as my understanding of my family was being transformed by these painful revelations. I'll give you the reference, I said finally, turning back to face her. The nonprofit work sounds worthwhile. Relief washed over her face. Thank you. I'll make sure they know it's for the position only, not a character reference. Actually, I said, making a decision I hoped I wouldn't regret. I'll give you both. A full reference, including acknowledgement that you're working to rebuild after significant personal mistakes. Rebecca's eyes widened. Why would you do that for me? Not for you, I clarified. For me. Because carrying bitterness is exhausting, and I need my energy for healing, for building something meaningful. I gestured to the sketches. This project matters more to me than punishing you. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. The Wilson Recovery residences aren't just about physical recovery, are they? No, I admitted. They're about all kinds of healing, including mine. A tentative silence settled between us, not comfortable, but not entirely hostile either. For the first time since my discharge, I could imagine a future where Rebecca and I might find some new form of relationship. Not the closeness we'd once shared, but perhaps something honest in its own right. I should let you get back to work, she said, rising from the chair. At the door, she paused. Emma? For what it's worth, I think Dad would be proud of who you're becoming through all this. I know I am. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me with the strange sensation of standing at a crossroads. One path leading to continued anger, the other toward something I wasn't ready to call forgiveness, but perhaps acceptance. I turned back to my drafting table, to the lines and curves that would become spaces for healing. If I could design a residence that helped others rebuild their lives after trauma, perhaps I could design a new future for myself as well. One that acknowledged the pain of betrayal without letting it define me. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, steady lights guiding travelers home across the vast distance. I wondered if Dad was out there somewhere, watching his daughters navigate the complicated legacy he'd left behind. Not just of money and property, but of secrets, hurts, and the capacity for both destruction and creation. The Wilson women were rebuilding from ruins, each in our own way. And for the first time since waking in that hospital room months ago, I felt genuinely hopeful about the structure taking shape from the broken pieces of my life. 6 months after my discharge from Northwest Memorial, I stood on the edge of the construction site at Green Lake, watching as workers poured the foundation for the first Wilson recovery residence. The autumn air carried the scent of wet earth and possibility, and for the first time in nearly a year, I stood without assistance. No wheelchair, no walker, not even the sleek carbon fiber cane that had become my constant companion through summer. "Quite a moment, isn't it?" Michael Thompson asked, coming to stand beside me. The banker had become something of a mentor during these months, helping me navigate the complexities of managing Dad's estate, while offering insights into the man my father had been beyond our family dynamics. "It doesn't feel real yet," I admitted, watching as concrete flowed into the carefully constructed forms. All those months of planning, designing, permit applications, and now it's actually happening. Michael smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Richard would have been right here with you, probably arguing with the foreman about the concrete mix." The image made me laugh. He was particular about his foundations. With good reason. Michael gestured to the expansive site. "The 10 units you're building here will support people for decades to come. The beginning of something extraordinary." I felt a swell of pride mixed with a peculiar vulnerability. The Wilson Recovery Residence represented more than just accessible housing. It embodied my own journey from brokenness toward healing. Each design decision had been influenced by my experience. The wide doorways that accommodated wheelchairs without screaming, institutional, the kitchens with adjustable height counters, the private garden spaces where residents could experience nature regardless of mobility challenges. "Ms. Wilson?" The site manager approached, hard hat tucked respectfully under his arm. "They're ready for you." I nodded, retrieving my own hard hat from my vehicle, a custom design in Wilson Construction blue with my name stenciled across the front. Dad's old hard hat was displayed prominently in my home office now, a reminder of his legacy and my own evolution. The small ceremony had been my idea, gathering the construction crew, design team, and key supporters to commemorate the pouring of the foundation. Not a formal groundbreaking with politicians and press, but something more intimate and meaningful. As I made my way carefully across the site, I spotted familiar faces among the gathered group. Olivia, who had taken a leave of absence from nursing to help manage the project operations. Marcus Jeffries from Horizon Designs, who had generously offered his technical expertise when my own physical limitations prevented me from executing certain aspects of the design. Dr. Jenkins, whose insights into patient recovery had informed countless features of the building. And standing slightly apart from the others, looking uncertain of her welcome, Rebecca. Our relationship had evolved into something neither of us could have predicted. Not friendship, the betrayal cut too deep for that, but a careful, deliberate rebuilding of trust through small, consistent actions. She had excelled at the nonprofit position, channeling her marketing skills into raising awareness about financial abuse. She paid her rent on time, respected my boundaries, and had even volunteered to help with some of the administrative aspects of the recovery residence project. I caught her eye and offered a small nod, which she returned with visible relief. Some wounds were healing, however slowly. The site manager handed me a trowel, and I stepped forward to smooth a symbolic section of the wet concrete. The physical act connected me to the countless construction sites I'd visited with Dad throughout my childhood. The smell, the sounds, the tangible sense of creation. This foundation, I began, addressing the gathered group, represents more than just the structural support for a building. It symbolizes the foundation of recovery itself, stable, carefully prepared, designed to bear weight without breaking. I gestured to the blueprints displayed on a nearby table. When completed, this residence will provide 10 fully accessible units for individuals recovering from life-altering injuries or illnesses. But more importantly, it will offer dignity, independence, and community during one of life's most challenging transitions. The words caught slightly in my throat as I continued. A year ago, I experienced firsthand how architecture can either support or hinder recovery. Hospital rooms designed without consideration for the psychological impact of healing environments. Home spaces that become obstacle courses when mobility is compromised. I looked around at the faces watching me, some curious, some moved, all attentive. The Wilson Recovery Residence aims to bridge that gap, to create spaces that acknowledge physical limitations without being defined by them, to build recovery into the very walls that shelter our residents. The small crowd applauded, and I felt a surge of emotion as I handed the trowel to the site manager. This moment, standing on my own 2 feet, initiating a project that bore my family name, surrounded by people who had supported my journey, represented a victory I couldn't have imagined during those dark days in the hospital. After the ceremony concluded and people began to disperse, Rebecca approached hesitantly. "That was beautiful, what you said about foundations." "Thank you," I replied, removing my hard hat. "I'm glad you could make it." "I wouldn't have missed it." She glanced at the construction site, then back to me. "Emma, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you, about the garden apartment." I tensed slightly. Though our relationship had improved, housing remained a sensitive topic between us. "What about it?" "My lease is up next month," she said, "and I've been thinking it might be time for me to find my own place." The statement surprised me. "You're doing well. At the nonprofit, then?" A small smile lifted the corners of her mouth. "I just got promoted to Director of Outreach. The salary's enough for me to afford a decent apartment in Capitol Hill." "Congratulations," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "That's impressive progress in 6 months." "It feels right," she admitted. "Working with women who've experienced financial abuse, helping them rebuild their lives after betrayal. It's healing something in me, too." She looked down at her hands, then back up to meet my eyes directly. "I've been seeing a therapist, Emma, trying to understand why I did what I did to you, the patterns that led me there." This was new information. Though we shared a roof, our conversations remained largely superficial, focused on practical matters rather than emotional processing. "What have you learned?" I asked, curious despite myself. Rebecca hesitated, then gestured toward a bench overlooking the construction site. "Do you have a few minutes?" We settled on the bench, watching as workers continued the meticulous process of pouring and finishing the foundation. The parallel to our own rebuilding wasn't lost on me. "I've discovered I have a pattern of destructive coping mechanisms when I feel insecure," Rebecca began, her voice steady but vulnerable. "Using manipulation to gain control, viewing relationships as transactional, believing that my worth depends on external validation." She twisted her wedding ring, a habit I noticed she maintained despite Daniel's abandonment. "With Dad, I used blackmail to secure financial security because I felt powerless in other ways. With Daniel, I sacrificed my integrity to maintain a relationship that validated my sense of worth. And with you, she paused, emotion flickering across her face. With you, I betrayed the one genuine relationship I had because I couldn't bear to face my own failures. The honesty in her self-assessment struck me. That's insightful. It's taken months of therapy to get here, she acknowledged. And I'm not telling you this to ask for forgiveness, Emma. I'm telling you because I want you to know I understand what I did, truly understand it, and I'm working to become someone who would never make those choices again. I studied my sister, seeing glimpses of the person I'd once trusted beneath the layers of poor choices and subsequent growth. I appreciate that, Rebecca, genuinely. Moving out is part of that process, she continued. I need to stand on my own, build my own foundation instead of depending on your generosity. And maybe, she hesitated, maybe some distance will be healthier for both of us right now. The suggestion held wisdom I couldn't deny. Though civil, our current arrangement carried constant reminders of betrayal and loss. Perhaps physical, separation would allow emotional healing to progress more naturally. I think you're right, I agreed. When would you want to move? I've found a place already, a small apartment in a converted Victorian on 15th. The lease starts in 3 weeks. She smiled tentatively. I'd still like to be involved with the Recovery Residence Project, if you'll have me. The outreach work at the nonprofit gives me connections that could benefit your residents. The offer seemed sincere, and her marketing expertise would indeed be valuable. We could use help developing the application process for potential residents, I suggested, making sure it reaches people who might not otherwise hear about the program. Rebecca nodded eagerly. Exactly the kind of thing I'm doing at work. I could easily adapt our outreach models. We sat in contemplative silence for a moment, watching the construction activity. The foundation was taking shape, guided by skilled hands following the blueprints I'd designed during my own recovery. It's strange, Rebecca said finally. A year ago, everything fell apart in the worst possible way. You were injured. Dad's careful estate planning was revealed. I lost everything I thought mattered. My marriage, my inheritance, my self-respect. She gazed at the construction site. And yet somehow we're all building something better from the ruins. The echo of my own words from months earlier wasn't lost on me. That's what Wilson women do, I replied softly. As we prepared to leave, Rebecca hesitated, then asked, Have you heard from Mom recently? Our mother had become more present in my life since our difficult conversation about Dad's past, visiting regularly and taking genuine interest in my recovery and projects. She'd even started volunteering twice weekly at a rehabilitation center, working with patients struggling with mobility issues similar to those I'd faced. She called yesterday, I said. She's thinking of selling her condo and moving closer to the recovery residence. Says she wants to be involved with the residents once we open. Rebecca smiled. She mentioned that to me too. I think helping with your recovery awakened something in her, a purpose beyond just existing. We all need that, I agreed, thinking of my own journey from patient to creator. We parted with tentative plans to meet the following week to discuss outreach strategies for the residents. As I watched Rebecca walk to her car, her posture straighter than it had been in months, her step purposeful, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginnings of understanding. My phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. Don't forget dinner with Marcus tonight, 7 p.m. at Altura. Wear something nice. I think it's more than just a work meeting. I smiled at her not-so-subtle hint. Marcus Jeffries and I had been spending considerable time together as the recovery residents progressed from concept to reality. His professional expertise had been invaluable, but lately our conversations had expanded beyond blueprints and building codes to more personal territories. Last week, he'd mentioned tickets to the symphony. Yesterday, he'd brought coffee just the way I liked it without being asked. Tonight's dinner was ostensibly to discuss the final details of the building's electrical system, but Olivia's instincts were usually correct about these matters. I texted back a quick acknowledgement and headed toward my car, suddenly aware of wanting to look my best for the evening ahead. The restaurant Marcus had chosen was elegant without being pretentious, tucked into a renovated brick building in Capitol Hill with a warm, intimate atmosphere. He was waiting when I arrived, standing to greet me with a smile that reached his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said, helping me with my chair. "Thank you," I replied, surprisingly pleased by the compliment. After months of focusing exclusively on recovery and work, it felt good to be seen as a woman rather than just a patient or project manager. The conversation flowed easily throughout dinner, touching on the recovery residents but expanding to books we'd both read, travel destinations we hoped to visit, and the subtle ways Seattle was changing around us. By the time dessert arrived, a shared plate of tiramisu, it was clear to both of us that this was, indeed, more than a business meeting. "Emma," Marcus said, setting down his coffee cup, "I've greatly enjoyed working with you on this project. Your vision, your determination, they're extraordinary." "The feeling is mutual," I replied. "I couldn't have brought this design to life without your expertise." He smiled, a hint of nervousness crossing his features. "I'm hoping we might continue our collaboration, even after the Green Lake residence is completed, perhaps on a more personal level as well as professional." The invitation was clear and surprisingly welcome. 10 months ago, romance had been the furthest thing from my mind as I fought to regain basic mobility. Even after physical recovery began in earnest, the emotional wounds of Rebecca's betrayal had left little space for new relationships. But now, sitting across from this kind, intelligent man who had seen me at my most determined and vulnerable, I felt ready to consider possibilities beyond healing and building. "I'd like that," I said simply. His smile widened, genuine pleasure lighting his features. "Excellent. Then may I suggest the symphony this weekend? They're performing Dvořák's New World Symphony." "Perfect choice," I replied, recognizing the significance of the composition, written when the composer was discovering new possibilities in America, crafting beauty from the blend of his European traditions and unfamiliar surroundings. As Marcus drove me home later that evening, the city lights reflected off the rain-slicked streets, creating patterns of illumination against the darkness. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Even in the darkest circumstances, light found ways to persist, to create unexpected beauty. When we reached the Queen Anne house, he walked me to the door, his hand lightly touching the small of my back. The gesture was respectful yet intimate, acknowledging both my independence and our growing connection. "Thank you for tonight," I said as we reached the porch. It was wonderful to talk about something other than load-bearing walls and accessibility regulations. He laughed softly, "Though I find your passion for both incredibly charming." His expression grew more serious. "Emma, I want you to know that I understand your life has been complicated. I'm not looking to rush anything." The consideration touched me deeply. "I appreciate that. I'm still finding my footing in some ways." I smiled. "But I'm definitely interested in exploring where this might lead." Under the porch light, with Seattle's persistent drizzle creating a cocoon of gentle sound around us, Marcus leaned forward and kissed me. A brief, tender moment that held promise rather than demand. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine for confirmation that the gesture was welcome. My answer was to reach up and draw him back for a second kiss, slightly longer but still sweetly tentative. A beginning, not a conclusion. "Good night, Emma Wilson," he said when we finally parted. "I'll call you tomorrow about the symphony tickets." "Good night, Marcus," I replied, feeling a flutter of anticipation for something beyond the next construction milestone or physical therapy achievement, something purely personal and potentially wonderful. Inside, the house was quiet save for the soft sounds of Olivia moving around upstairs. I made my way to Dad's study, my study now, and settled at the drafting table. Although it was late, I felt energized rather than tired, my mind bubbling with new ideas for the recovery residence and beyond. I pulled out a fresh sheet of drafting paper and began sketching a concept that had been forming in my mind for weeks: a second residence, this one designed specifically for women rebuilding after financial abuse. The symmetry felt right, using my own recovery from both physical trauma and financial betrayal to create spaces where others could heal from similar wounds. As I worked, adding details and annotations to the preliminary design, I realized how far I'd come from that hospital room where I'd first learned of Rebecca's betrayal. The journey hadn't been linear or easy. There had been setbacks, moments of rage and despair, days when the physical pain had nearly overwhelmed my determination to heal. But through it all, I had continued building, not just the physical structure taking shape at Green Lake, but a new understanding of family, of forgiveness, of my own capacity for resilience. The foundation Dad had provided, both financially and in the values he'd instilled, had supported me through the collapse of what I thought my life would be. And now, pencil in hand and future opening before me, I could see the emerging structure of what my life could become instead: richer, more complex, and ultimately stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a rare gift in Seattle's autumn, and I decided to visit the construction site again. Not for any official reason, but simply to spend time with the emerging building, to witness its daily progress the way Dad had always done with his projects. When I arrived, work was already well underway, the site humming with the sounds of construction. I parked at the designated area and made my way carefully along the gravel path leading to the supervisor's trailer, where I checked in and collected a visitor's hard hat. "Progress looks good," I commented to the site manager, Joel, a veteran of Dad's company who had come out of semi-retirement specifically for this project. "On schedule and under budget," he confirmed with gruff satisfaction. "The foundation pour went perfectly yesterday. We'll be ready for framing next week if the weather holds." I smiled at his cautious optimism, a hallmark of Seattle construction projects, where rain could delay outdoor work for days at a time. "The forecast looks promising." Joel nodded, glancing at the clear blue sky with the suspicion of a man who had been betrayed by Pacific Northwest weather too many times to trust. "We'll see. Either way, we're making excellent progress." He walked me through the site, pointing out various technical details and decisions they'd made during execution. Though I understood the architectural principles intimately, the practical application sometimes required adjustments to my original design, a reality Dad had impressed upon me early in my training. "Architecture is theory, construction is reality," he would say. "The best builders know how to bridge the gap between the two." As Joel was called away to address a delivery issue, I found myself alone at the far edge of the property, where a row of mature fir trees provided natural screening from the adjacent park. The location had been a key factor in my selection of this site, the balance of privacy and connectedness to the community, reflecting the transition that future residents would experience during their recovery. "It's really happening, isn't it?" I turned to find my mother standing a few feet away, dressed casually in jeans and a waterproof jacket, her silver hair catching the morning light. "Mom," I greeted her with surprise. "I didn't know you were coming by today." She moved to stand beside me, gazing at the construction site. "I wanted to see it, to really understand what you're building here." She glanced sideways at me. "Rebecca told me about your dinner with Marcus last night." I raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." A small smile curved her lips. "She ran into Olivia at the grocery store this morning. Apparently your roommate is quite excited about this development." Olivia has been trying to nudge us together for months, I admitted, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. She thinks he's perfect for me. And is he? Mom asked, her tone gently curious rather than intrusive. I considered the question, watching, as workers moved purposefully across the site, each contributing their specialized skills to the overall vision. It's too early to say perfect, but there's potential. He understands my work, respects what I've been through, and doesn't try to rush me. I smiled slightly. Plus, he appreciates good architecture and doesn't mind when I spend hours talking about optimal doorway widths. Mom laughed, a genuine sound I realized I'd heard too rarely in recent years. Your father was the same way. I once made the mistake of asking him about load-bearing walls at a dinner party. We were still discussing beam calculations when the last guest left 3 hours later. The memory created a warm connection between us, acknowledging Dad's influence on both our lives without reopening old wounds. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the construction activity. I've been thinking about what you said, Mom finally continued, about selling my condo and moving closer to here. And I've decided to do it. She gestured toward the building site. These people who will live here, they'll need more than just accessible architecture. They'll need community, understanding, practical support as they rebuild their lives. She straightened her shoulders slightly. I've discovered I'm good at providing that. My volunteer work at the rehabilitation center has shown me that. Pride swelled in my chest. At 64, my mother was discovering new purpose, new ways to contribute. The residents would be lucky to have you, I said sincerely. It feels right, she replied, using this chapter of my life to support others starting new chapters of their own. She turned to face me directly. Emma, I know we've had our differences. I wasn't always the mother you needed, especially when you and Rebecca were growing up. I started to protest, but she held up a hand. Please, let me say this. I favored Rebecca because she seemed to need me more. You were so self-sufficient, so clearly your father's daughter. I told myself you didn't need the same attention. She shook her head. It was wrong of me. Every child deserves to feel equally loved, equally important. The acknowledgement touched a tender spot I'd protected for years. Thank you for saying that. I'd like us to have a closer relationship moving forward, she continued. Not just as mother and daughter, but as women engaged in meaningful work. She gestured toward the construction site. I've even been thinking about going back to school, maybe getting a certification in rehabilitation counseling. Really? This surprised me. Mom had never expressed interest in formal education beyond her teaching degree decades ago. She nodded, a hint of excitement in her eyes. The volunteer coordinator at the rehab center suggested it. She says I have a natural gift for working with patients who are struggling with the emotional aspects of physical recovery. I think that's wonderful, I said, meaning it. And it would be a tremendous asset to the residents here. Mom smiled, then hesitated, before asking, have you spoken with Rebecca about her moving plans? Yes, yesterday after the foundation ceremony. She told me about the apartment on 15th. How do you feel about her leaving? I considered the question carefully. It's the right step for both of us. Living under the same roof has been complicated. Understandably so, Mom acknowledged. Do you think you'll ever be able to truly forgive her? The question hung in the autumn air, weighty with implication. I gazed across the construction site, where the foundation we'd poured yesterday was beginning to set, creating the base upon which everything else would be built. I'm not sure forgiveness is the right word for what's happening between us, I said finally. It's more like reconstruction. We can't go back to what we were before. That relationship has been irreparably altered. But we might be able to build something new, something different, but still meaningful. Mom nodded slowly. That makes sense. Relationships can be like buildings in that way. Sometimes renovation isn't possible, and you need to start fresh with a new design. The architectural metaphor made me smile. Exactly. And like any construction project, it takes time, patience, and a willingness to adjust the plans as you go. Your father would be proud of you, Mom said softly. Not just for this. She gestured to the construction site. But for how you've handled everything. The accident, Rebecca's betrayal, the inheritance. You've shown tremendous grace, Emma. The compliment warmed me, particularly coming from someone who had been sparing with praise throughout my childhood. Thank you. That means a lot. As we prepared to leave the site, Mom mentioned casually, I ran into Michael Thompson at the bank yesterday. He said the secondary trust still has significant funds even after the investment in this project. I nodded. About $3 million remaining. I'm already planning the second residence, focusing specifically on women recovering from financial abuse. That seems fitting, she observed, using Rebecca's betrayal as inspiration to help others who've experienced similar violations of trust. I prefer to think of it as using my own recovery as a blueprint, I corrected gently. It's not about Rebecca anymore. It's about what I'm building from the experience. Mom studied me for a moment, then smiled. Of course. I stand corrected. We parted with plans to meet for lunch the following week to discuss her housing search and potential roles at the recovery residence. As I watched her walk back to her car, steps steady, shoulders straight, I reflected on how all of us were evolving through this experience, finding new versions of ourselves in the aftermath of betrayal and loss. That evening, as I updated the project timeline in my home office, my phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Symphony tickets secured for Saturday. Dinner beforehand at Canlis? The invitation to Seattle's most elegant restaurant signaled that he considered this a significant date, not just a casual outing. I felt a flutter of anticipation as I typed my reply. Sounds perfect. Looking forward to it. Moments later, Olivia appeared in the doorway, grinning mischievously. So? Details about last night? I laughed, setting aside my work. I'm surprised Rebecca didn't tell you everything during your grocery store encounter this morning. She just said you looked happy when you came home. Olivia perched on the edge of my desk. I want the full report. I filled her in on the dinner, the conversation, the kiss goodnight, and the upcoming symphony date. Her expression grew increasingly delighted with each detail. I knew it, she exclaimed when I finished. From the first time he brought you coffee without being asked, I told you he was interested. Yes, you're very perceptive, I conceded, with a smile. Though I'm still not sure where this is going. My life is complicated enough right now. Olivia's expression softened. That's precisely why this is good timing, Em. You've spent the past year focused on healing, physically, emotionally, professionally. You've rebuilt your relationship with your mom, found a new understanding with Rebecca, and created a meaningful project that honors your father's legacy. She gestured around the study. Maybe now it's time to build something just for you, something that's about joy, not just recovery. Her insight struck me deeply. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, she replied with a wink. You've just been too busy being stubborn to notice. We laughed together, the sound filling the study with warmth and possibility. Later, after Olivia had gone to bed, I found myself standing at the window, gazing out at the Seattle skyline. From this hill in Queen Anne, the city spread below like a constellation, lights defining the shape of human habitation against the darkness of Elliott Bay. Dad had taught me to see buildings as more than structures. They were expressions of human needs and aspirations, physical manifestations of our desire for shelter, community, beauty. The recovery residence represented my contribution to that tradition, spaces designed to support healing in all its dimensions. But Olivia was right. While pouring myself into the project had been necessary and healing, perhaps it was time to expand my focus, to build personal happiness alongside professional fulfillment. My phone buzzed with a final message from Marcus. "Sleep well, Emma. Dreams are architectural too, blueprints for possibilities." The sentiment made me smile. He understood the language that shaped my worldview, the metaphors that helped me make sense of experience. Perhaps that understanding could form the foundation of something meaningful between us, not a replacement for what I'd lost, but a new structure altogether, designed for the person I was becoming rather than the person I'd been. I sent a reply before setting the phone aside. "I like that perspective. Looking forward to exploring those possibilities with you." Outside, the city continued its nighttime rhythm, buildings standing as testament to human resilience and creativity. Within those structures, countless stories unfolded, some of betrayal and loss, others of connection and hope. My own story had taken an unexpected turn, the trust fund theft becoming not an ending, but a pivot point. What had seemed like catastrophe had ultimately pushed me toward greater authenticity, deeper purpose, new possibilities. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, standing tall, movement fluid, eyes clear and purposeful. The physical recovery was nearly complete. The emotional journey continued, but with each day, the pain of betrayal receded further, replaced by the satisfaction of creation. Tomorrow would bring progress on the construction site, conversations with potential residents, preparations for my date with Marcus, and likely some new development in the complex dance of rebuilding family connections. Each aspect represented a strand in the fabric of the life I was weaving from threads that had once seemed irreparably torn. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.